Welcome to the Ignite the Day podcast hosted by Rhema UK and Ireland. Igniting your day with revelation, inspiration, and encouragement, helping you to live the life that God has called you to.
How does your original church, Dagenham, which you're still the main pastor at Dagenham, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah. So how do they feel about the vision to go out and the fact that you're out a lot? How have you managed to manage that, I guess?
Sure. Well, it's never really caused problems until last year.
Okay.
And I guess because a lot of my out and about was Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday evenings. And then when I said we're going to take on this church in Manchester,
yeah,
a couple of people didn't get the vision. A couple of people were quite harsh about it, actually. It was quite a difficult time for us as a church. And even people in leadership were suddenly saying some very nasty things. And it was like, oh, my goodness. And it's like, to me, I can't understand the mentality where someone go, all we want is our nice little church, and that's all we want. We really don't care about those people over there. We really don't care about those people over there. Yeah. And here's a church that's literally going to die. And I'm not trying to, if someone doesn't take it on and pastor it, there's no one there who can take it on. Yeah. This church is going to die. And it's going to close down, and they're going to sell the building, and it'll become, something not a church.
Yeah.
And to me, that was just, when I was seeing that and, meeting these pastors who are in their 70s, and man, they just needed to, they wanted to have a legacy. They wanted to have a succession, and COVID had just taken the life out of them. The pastor had got quite unwell. And I was like, no, I want to help these people. And so we had to sit down and basically explain to people, this is not the culture of Tree of Life.
Okay.
And there's always going to be some people who are never going to get a bigger vision.
Yeah.
Right? There's some people who, I really don't care about what's going on anywhere else. This is my church. I go there on Sundays and it's great and I like it. And that's okay. I'm not going to, you can't push that on everyone. And we've benefited a lot. My associate pastor in Dagenham, Lee and Janet, they're just such solid couple and so humble. They could literally step up, step down, doesn't bother them. And so it's been very good, again, because of the key people, the right people.
Yeah.
And I think really everything comes down to people. When I first started, I thought everything would come down to money. Money, you can believe for money. Money is not an issue. It's people. I could have 3 more churches in the UK tomorrow if I had the people.
So I mean, that's I 100% agree with that. Everything falls or it rises on the people that you are working with and the people that are doing it. So how do you find the right people? What lessons have you got about team and building team and finding the right people for the right roles? And
Sure. Well, we have what I call the 3 C's. And the first one is character.
Okay.
1 Timothy 3, do they have a godly character? The second C is capability. Can they do the job?
Yeah.
And then the third C, and this is something we had to realize on the way again, is compatibility.
Okay, yep.
So you could have someone in your church, Toby, and they could have godly character, they could have capability, they could be a great elder, a great small group leader, a great worship leader, but if they don't fit in with you,
it
doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And so they're the 3 things we look for. I've just had a situation, and I don't want to go into too specifics, but I had to correct somebody on one of our teams. And I was so happy that they'd made this mistake because I'd never had to correct them before.
Okay.
And I had no idea how they responded to correction. And I corrected them, and they were very humble, very gracious, and they took it really well. And this is my belief. I believe you don't know someone until you've had to correct them.
Okay.
So I am very wary about appointing someone into leadership who I've never had to correct.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's a really important thing. Paul was building a fire one day, and he picks up a snake and puts it on the fire thinking the snake's a stick.
Yeah.
Now, when I read that with a Western mindset, I don't live with snakes. I don't understand snakes. I think, Paul, what is wrong with you? Did you bang your head too hard when you got shipwrecked? How could you mistake a snake and a stick? But when I go out to someone like Kenya or somewhere with snakes, and I say, how did he do this? They say, well, in the winter or at nighttime, the snakes go absolutely rigid. They go absolutely cold. And they basically look like a stick. They don't move. They're almost one step away from being dead in this sort of hibernation state, that they sleep so deeply because they're cold-blooded. And so it's very understandable you can mistake one for a stick. But when Paul throws it in the fire, it then comes alive, jumps out and bites him. And so if you haven't been with somebody in a fire, you might think they're a nice little stick, but actually they're a snake.
How interesting.
And so we have to take time. We have to take time. Appointing leaders too quickly has been the single biggest mistake I've made in the last 14 years.
Oh, well, that's a huge statement to make.
Yeah.
I mean, well, without going into examples, but tell us about that. Why is that?
Well, I'll give you one example. I won't name names, but it nearly cost us one of our churches.
Oh.
And they started a rival church across the road and everything. And if I'd just given it a few months, I would have seen it. But I was keen to get that going, keen to get it started, keen to get it off the ground. And I appointed this couple as elders, and they were teaching nonsense. They were disruptive. They were telling lies. And they took a church of 40 people down to 6 people in 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that church is now over 40 again. It's thriving. And one of those 6 is now the pastor. So praise God for that.
Praise God, yeah. and so character, capability and compatibility. How do you test for those then? So time is obviously a factor in observation, but is there anything specific you would do? How do you manage that process?
I watch for people who will serve when no one's looking. I think one of the biggest problems in the charismatic movement, and I see this with people coming out of Bible college a lot, they're desperate to be in the spotlight. They're desperate to be platformed. And I've got a ministry, I need a platform. It's like, well, what have you actually got to say?
Yeah.
Well, I've been to Bible college, I could preach on faith. Okay, so you're going to give me a sermon on Mark 11, 23 and 24. I could call 100 preachers who could give me that sermon and back it up from examples of their own life where they've had to stand in faith. Whereas all you've got is the words right now. So rather than look for a platform, you need something to say. What have you got worth saying? And so I'll deliberately pick someone over someone and just watch what happens. How people respond to that's really vital. We had one guy in our church, I've been here 9 years. Why are you letting this guy preach? He's only been here 5 years. And it's like, well, I did let you preach, remember? Yeah, but you never asked me again. Yeah, because I sat down with you after and I tried to help you preach better next time and you weren't interested.
Yeah.
But this guy, he'll sit down, he'll phone me up and say, correct me, tell me, help me. And I said, that attitude. And so the people in 3 broad categories. So some people in your church are unteachable.
Yeah.
They'll never learn anything. Some people are teachable, and over the space of time, they will learn and they will pick it up eventually. But the people I like are the people who are keen and willing to be taught.
Yeah.
People who turn up with their notebooks and turn up and, I've got one guy just text me the other day. He goes, Ben, I've been listening to the Suffolk stuff you're teaching in our Suffolk church. I teach on Sunday nights in the Suffolk church on the gifts of the Spirit. He goes, I've somehow missed this message. Can you just send it to me? I know it's on your phone. And I'm like, just keen. And I admire that. So we've had a situation where we've had to sort of rebuild our worship team from scratch at the moment in our Dagenham church. And so I'll sit there on Wednesday night when I'm teaching. I do a live stream every Wednesday night. I'm just looking at the names of people logged in. I'm like, okay, that, and that, and that. They can be the worship leaders because they're keen.
Yeah, okay.
And then other people, well, why am I not leading worship? Well, why are you not listening to me preach? Why are you not there on a Sunday every week? Why is it all about when, and one of the things we've seen, and I haven't reacted quickly enough to it, but it's happened 3 times now in the last 2 years with pastors, and we've lost all of them. We've lost 3 couples because of this. Is they get under time pressure, and I understand the time pressure. I mean, you've just gone full time, is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Praise God. I remember those days were just blissful. But I mean, I was a lay pastor. We've got 20 pastors in the Tree of Life family. 8 of them are paid, so we've got 12 lay pastors.
Yeah.
Okay. And I understand there's a huge pressure on that.
Yeah.
And not just the pastors, any volunteer, worship leader, ushers, everything. It's a huge. Life is busy, especially in London.
Yeah.
So I understand that. But what I hadn't picked up on is some people, when there's a time squeeze, will squeeze out every activity that's developmental and just keep with the ones where they're at the front.
Yeah.
And that is a massive warning sign to me now. Because every time I've seen that person's crashed and burned within a few months.
Yeah.
And so I watch for that as well. If someone's under a time squeeze, what do they give up?
Yeah,
and finances as well. Jesus said, where your finances are, that's where your heart is. If you're not faithful in mammon, you're not faithful in anything. You can't be trusted with true spiritual riches. So I don't sit and look at the finances. I don't sit and look at people's giving. But if I'm about to appoint someone as an elder or pastor, I'll happily go into the church database and find out what they've given last year.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Your point about giving up developmental stuff and prioritizing other things in front of that is such a big challenge. We see it. Like you mentioned, I've just come out of full-time secular employment as well, and I saw it in a lot of my teams. They were so focused on delivery that they never spent any time developing themselves. And the reality, from my perspective, was the more you develop yourself, the better you'll be at delivery.
Yeah.
and so if you're under a time squeeze, cutting out all your development actually does you and the organization a disservice. And it's just the same in the church.
Yeah,
if we aren't putting God first, it's like the preacher that only ever goes to the Bible when he's preparing a sermon.
Yeah.
And doesn't actually spend some time in the Word and prayer for himself, for his own personal enrichment. You're going to burn yourself out. You're going to, ultimately, you're not going to have the depths from which to serve.
Yeah. In the corporate world, they call it sharpening the saw.
Yeah,
if you've heard that before. If you don't sharpen your saw, how are you going to cut the tree down?
Yeah, 100%.
And so, for example, last year I took 7 of our pastors to America to a pastors' conference.
Yeah.
Because I just felt there was nothing in the UK that was supplying what I needed my pastors to learn.
Yeah.
And so I took them to the US to a pastors' conference, and we had 2 people email me, and both of them said, this is a waste of the church's money. This is, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Both those people had been on America on holiday that year. Work that one out. I don't think it's a waste of money to develop our pastors. I don't think it's a waste of money to put people in situations where they're being stretched, where they're being forced to see things and because it's not just going to a conference for a week, but, I had somebody phone me up recently, and they'd been at Charis Bible College, they've entered ministry, and they got a great ministry, a growing ministry. They've come to speak at our church, a guest speaker, and they phoned me up. They said, I'm really struggling to believe. We need a venue. We need this. We need that. I just hung up on them. And then I picked up the phone a few minutes later, and I said, do you know why I hung up on you? He said, no. I said, you were a student at Charis Bible College in Woodland Park in Colorado. While Andrew Womack was in his biggest building phase ever for 3 years, you watched over $100 million worth of buildings being built while you were a student. And you saw that with your own eyes every week. And every week you're driving to college, and there's a new car park, and there's a new building, there's a new road. And you're struggling to believe for a venue. I said, don't even start with me. I said, you had the best lesson. I wish I'd had that lesson. And no one ever showed me that, And okay, point made.
That's so true. That is, yeah. So I'm loving this character, capability, compatibility, and what I'm wondering, so your observation, are they givers? Are they committed? Are they servants? Are they learners? All this kind of good stuff. I think that's great. How do you do that from afar, though? So I get that in your Dagenham church, where you're kind of there a fair amount. But if you're planting a church in Stirling, which I think is where your Scotland church is, you're obviously not up there every 5 minutes. How do you observe that when you're looking at a new church plant, thinking, okay, who could be the leader of this church plant? Who could be the potential, the elder or the pastor or whatever?
Sure, I think there's 2 factors. Number one is we have to realize we're not living in the 18th century anymore. Praise God. Must admire these guys. We've had a couple of times. We've got some pastors. We've got, like, for example, the pastor of our Swindon church lives in Woking.
Okay.
And so that's too far away. And it's like, he can FaceTime you. It's not like the days of Paul and Timothy, where Paul said to Timothy, you're my spiritual son, I'm your spiritual father, and then wrote 2 letters to him in 20 years.
Yeah.
You can send an email every day. You can chat every day. It's a whole new world. So I think part of that is we have to sort of get rid of our old sort of context of geography.
Okay.
The world's changed. And it's, my youngest son's a crusade evangelist. And he says, you start your crusade on night 1, and let's say you have 3,000 people night 1. By the time you get to night 5, you'll have 6,000 people, because the people get healed, the people get saved. They then bring people.
Yeah.
That works fine, the village in Kenya or Uganda. I honestly believe that you could pull someone out of a wheelchair in one of your churches on a Sunday morning, and they'd get completely healed, and their neighbors wouldn't even know about it.
Yeah.
In London, neighbors wouldn't even know. We just don't know each other anymore. But who would know their Facebook friends, their Twitter friends, their Instagram friends. There's, it's the connections are different.
Yeah.
I still believe in local. I still believe we should build local churches. I still believe we should reach communities, but communities aren't quite what they were. And so even though I'm not in Sterling all the time, I'm on a WhatsApp group with them. I'm discussing things with them. I can be on the phone to them. I can talk to them. Even when I'm not there, I can watch a video of the sermon. So it's a whole different world. And then the second thing is it's something I told my church recently, because one of the things I've been convicted of recently is, I'm building this culture, but I'm not often very explicit about it. And we have to tell people what we're doing and tell people what we're building. And so if you're building a culture of trust, then what I've found is that a lot of people say you've got to build trust, you've got to earn trust. Okay, fine. But I'm actually going to start at the default, I'm going to trust you. So when I meet someone new, my default is I trust you. You haven't lied to me. You've never let me down. You've never deceived me. So I'm just going to trust you. Now, you can lose that trust. You can, unearn it. But my default is I'm going to trust you. Has that led to a couple of situations where I've been hurt? Yes. Has it been better overall? Yes. And so in those situations, my default is trust. My default is, if you tell me something, I believe you. I believe you tell me the truth. I believe it's right. I believe it's going to happen that way. And so that helps a lot when you're in those situations where you don't see someone and it's remote and whatever else.
I love that. And I think you're so right about how we use technology in the modern age to support doing things differently and better. If we stick to the old ways, we're missing a trick, aren't we?
Yes, definitely. And I think if you watch our YouTube channel during COVID, we never worked on our YouTube channel before that. It was just occasionally I'd record a video, but then COVID happens, we're all locked down, so you can see me over the COVID. Suddenly get a better mic, get a better studio, get this, get that, And thank you very much, by the way. We're using the camera that you actually purchased for us, which we really are blessed by.
Oh, praise God!
Yeah, so you are seeing this right now on that camera. Yes.
That's good.
I want to say one other thing quickly as well. It doesn't quite answer your question, but I just feel this would help people. When I was at Bible school, and again, I'm not criticizing them, they didn't know any better, but we were taught to really care for the really broken, needy people in our churches. And every church will attract broken, needy people. But what I've found is this, and this may sound a bit callous when I first say it, but it's pretty much true. Have you heard of the Peralta principle, the 80-20 rule?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 20% of your church are the superstars of your church.
Yeah.
They do 80% of the giving, 80% of the serving, 80% of the loving, 80% of the witnessing. They're the superstars. Conversely, 20% of your church has 8% of the needs, 8% of the problems, 8% of the strife is caused by these people. And so what I found was this: the majority of the church are in the middle.
Yeah.
They're just, and I use the phrase wannabes. I don't have a better phrase. They're just wannabes. They just want to be where the action is. They want to be where, everything's happening. So if I spend all my life focusing on the drains, focusing on the problems, focusing on the difficult people, the whole church develops a regressive culture. To get my attention, you have to have a problem.
Yeah.
And when we started the church, people would literally, and every pastor probably knows what I'm talking about, they'd literally miss church Sunday so that I'd call them Monday to find out how they're doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so what I decided was I'm not going to do anymore. I'm going to focus on the superstars. So instead of phoning the guys who missed church, I'm phoning the guys who helped, who turned up early, who solved the problem, who set the sound up, who bought something in the church. I'm phoning, thank you so much. And what we did, we started creating this culture where we celebrated the heroes. I'm discipling the people who really need the highest level of discipleship. And the whole church then develops a progressive culture.
Yeah.
And we start to move forward. And we started, if you want past attention, go and do something great. Go and be a hero.
I love that.
And so we've changed the whole culture of the church, this progressive culture. And that makes a massive difference. That makes pastoring so much easier.
I love that. Because you're teaching a culture of leveling up rather than leveling down, aren't you?
Exactly. And yeah.
No, that's really powerful. Yeah.
The thing that goes alongside that is you've got to make sure you don't leave skeletons in the closet as well.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll give you an actual example. We've had a situation in the last few weeks where several of our pastors have been accused of gossiping.
Okay.
And they haven't gossiped. They've just shared a problem pastor to pastor.
Okay, yeah.
You know, well, that's gossip. That's gossip. You just told Ben about what I'm going through. And it's just one of those things that sort of struck 3 or 4 times in different churches, almost all at once.
Okay.
And in one situation, one of our pastors was accused of gossip, and it's 3 people. And it's like, you almost want to say to people, at what stage, while the 3 of you were talking behind the back of one of my pastors, did you decide they were a gossip?
Yeah.
You know, so I call it irony police now. Because and so I've just written a whole sort of Bible study on Corinthians where Chloe goes to Paul and says, hey, Paul, there's fornication in the church. There's people arguing in the church. And Paul doesn't go, Chloe, you're a gossip.
Yeah.
You know, he says, thank you for letting me know so we can deal with this.
Yeah.
That's not gossip. When Paul writes to Timothy, he said, Alexander did me great harm. Watch out if he comes to you. Be careful around him. That's good pastoring.
Yeah.
And so I went for all this, and I just published it on my blog, and I just sent it to every one of our churches. And I said, this needs to be read. You need to understand this, because we can't leave that just there.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
You know?
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
No, that's really powerful, Ben. Conscious of time, I've got 2 questions I want to hit before we close, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
First one, what would be the single most important piece of advice you'd give to a prospective church planter?
Don't quit. Don't quit. It's hard. It's really hard. It's like, I tell people it's like punching down a brick wall with your bare hands. It's going to take longer than you think. It's going to hurt more than you think. But when you get through, it's just worth every second of that. People come to your church. I do a message to all my church planters, and I call it deer people, as in the animal, the deer.
Okay, yeah.
So Jesus talks about sheep and shepherds, and there's goats, there's wolves, there's all these different animals. And you think when you start a church, you think, man, I'm going to get all the sheep. And you don't. You get deer. Okay, I live in Dagenham. I am 20-minute drive away from sort of rural Essex. And so if I drive to, we have a church in Brentwood. If I drive to Brentwood, drive through the fields and everything, you know, sometimes I see deer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't see deer. And sometimes it rains and the deer come out, and sometimes it rains and the deer stay in. Sometimes it's warm and the deer come out, sometimes it's warm. And if you see a deer, you normally see 2 or 3 others with it. You don't normally see one on their own, and then you see none. And that's church planting. You go, wow, we had 15 people this week, and then next week there's 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's deer. They're not at the sheep stage yet. Think about this. You go into town. You pick any town, throw a dartboard at a map of the UK. Right, I'm going to start a church there. Okay. So this town's got a few churches already. It's got a few established churches. So who's going to come to your first few services? It's not going to be good Christians, healthy, whole, growing Christians. Because even if they're sort of word of faith, and there's no word of faith church in that town, they've still done their best to plug into one of the Pentecostal churches in the town, and they've done their best to work with it. So they're plugged in because they're good Christians, they're healthy Christians. Non-Christians aren't going to come to your church. They're not going to get up on a Sunday morning, feel they need to go and get right with God, and go to a church that meets in a school or in a community centre or whatever. They're going to go to a church that has a building that looks like a church in their imagination, because there's still enough of that cultural pull in the UK. So who's going to come to your church? The Christians that aren't plugged into any other church in the town. And within 3 weeks, you'll know exactly why they're not plugged into any other church in the town. And it's hard, because you're dealing with these people. You're trying to give yourself credibility in that town. And all these things are going on at once. It can be very, very hard. So my one piece of advice is don't quit. If you believe this is of God, just hold on. Remember why you're doing it. And celebrate every single victory. You know, when you get to 10 people, have a party. You know, when you get to 20 people, have another, but just celebrate every victory.
Brilliant. So don't quit and celebrate. I love that.
Yeah.
Final question then for you, Ben.
Go for it.
Life and ministry balance. I mean, I look at you and you've got 4 kids that are all on fire for God. I think three out of the 4 are all are in ministry.
That's right. Yeah.
I think your 4th one's a doctor, if I remember
correct,
correctly. Yeah. So all pursuing what God's called them to do, making a difference in the world, on fire for God. Your wife's amazing, on fire for God. You're pastoring, a significant network of churches now. You're traveling all over the place. How do you balance all that? How do you make sure your kids grow up on fire for God? How do you make sure you don't burn yourself out?
Well, first of all, let me just brag a little bit and say that we're now at the stage of life where we don't have to do that. All our children are adults now. My youngest is 18. And
Okay.
as you know, she's studying at Raymer at the moment.
Yeah,
She's
awesome.
very plugged on. She's working for the church. So I'm at the stage now where I can literally, like I said, I can go today. We're going to drive up to Scotland. We're actually going to drive up to Yorkshire today. I'm going to take my wife out for high tea. Then we'll drive to Scotland, Minster, Blackpool, Sheffield. Saturday I'm in Rotherham, back in Sunday morning for Dagenham. I don't have to worry about the kids anymore. I don't have to put them in the car anymore. So that's nice. Well, I've finally got to the stage of life where, you know, we're sort of, but at the time there was I'll give you three things. Number one, this is something Bob Yandian told me once. He said, a lot of people talk about the fact that the family that prays together stays together. He says, but that's not always true. I know a lot of families that prayed together didn't stay together. He said, Ben, do you want the advice? It's the family that plays together stays together. And so we have always played together a lot. We've played board games. We've gone out paintballing and things like that, and all sorts of different things. There's always been that element of play.
Okay.
I think that's really important. I think that the balance has to be, if you want to raise good children, is you want to have authority. You need to be in charge of their lives. Children are not smart. That's why God gave them to you. And he gave them to you smaller than you, so you can pick them up and move them around if they're not where they should be. And so we need to take that authority, but at the same time, it needs to be balanced with affection, because it's affection that causes them to internalize that. So when they become adults, they don't walk away from it.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of kids, they go off to university, and mum and dad like, oh, she's just gone off to university and she's sleeping around, she's drinking, she's not going to church, she's this, she's that. Why? Because you never had something to cause her to internalize. And the third thing I would say is be part of a good, healthy church. You know, this is really important. And so we've always, you know, it amazes me. I was a youth pastor for 7 years before I started Tree of Life. And it amazes me, you know, you'd have like, where's Jimmy? And Jimmy's 14 years old. Oh, we let him make his own decision whether to go to church. Oh, really? So tomorrow morning when he wakes up and decides I'm going to go to school, you're just going to let him?
Yeah.
When he's got toothache and he doesn't want to go to the dentist, you're just going to let him? When he wants to eat a bowl of M&Ms for breakfast, you're going to let him do that? What if he then wants to shower again? Is that okay? You know, you let these children make these monumental decisions and they're not ready to make them.
Yeah.
So as for me in my house, we're going to church on Sunday morning. I don't care what you do, you're going to church. Well, the football, the sports, there's a 0.0005% chance you're going to play football. There's a 100% chance you're going to have to meet Jesus one day. You're coming to church.
Yeah.
And we've always made church a central part of our family. One of the things I've seen over and over again as a pastor, if the parents are casual about church, then the children will be utterly disinterested. It'll go from that in one generation. And I've been doing this long enough now to see the next generation. That's what happens.
Wow.
You know, so.
Wow. Ben, thank you so much. I mean, you've just shared some really powerful truths and insights and experiences into your life and ministry over the last 14, 15 plus years. You know, audience, go back and have a listen to this again. There's some stuff that Ben's shared today that you won't get on the first time. You'll need to go back and listen to it again, and you'll kind of go, yeah, really, Ben, really? And then you listen to it 2 or 3 times, and I think it might start sinking in because there's some real truths there. They're not always palatable. We don't always like the truth. The truth can hurt, but I would recommend you go back and listen to this again, especially if you have got it on your heart to plant a church. The wisdom that Ben is sharing and has shared today is really powerful. So go and listen again. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Where can people reach you, buddy? If they want to get in touch, where do they go?
My email is ben@tree.church. I can't make it any easier than that, ben@tree.church. Our website is www.tree.church. And the other thing I'd plug for anyone who's interested is I do a blog for leaders. And it's Ben Conway, all one word, .net, benjaminconway.net. And I try and update that every single week. I've had pastors email me and say that your blog saved my church.
Oh, wow. Praise God.
I've got stuff there, what to do when you're stabbed in the back, what to do, how to build culture. There's a lot of stuff on there that I really think will help anyone who wants to be in any form of leadership, but specifically church leadership.
Brilliant. Ben, thank you so much. Hook up everyone with that, with Tree of Life and with Ben's blog. That will be a blessing to you. I know that for sure. Ben, have a great day. Thank you so much.
Very much. You too.
And we'll catch you soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Ignite the Day podcast. We hope that we've ignited your day with revelation, inspiration, and encouragement, and that we're helping you to live the life that God has called you to.